Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are back with a couple of speakers. The first topic will be culture and people. So please welcome with me to the stage Shiny Chopra, the head of people and culture at AHOY, and Hala Aluraibi, director of operation and strategy at InterCorp. Please put your hands together.
Yes, I like that. Thank you, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Hala Aluraibi.
Hi, I'm Shiny Chopra.
So before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about yourself. I was supposed to do that sooner, so the MC would do it, but I didn't. So I came to the UAE from Canada in 1999, and during the networking event, I realized it is the year of birth of some of the people here. Since coming to the UAE, I have exclusively worked in the startup environment. Some of the businesses including consulting, FMB, I was just checking my spelling, consulting, FMB, nightlife, and fitness. It's been an amazing journey. I've learned a lot, and some of these lessons I hope to share with you today.
Thank you, Hala. So I started my journey 16 years ago. I started working in London, moved back to India, and in 2010, I moved to Dubai. Since then, even I have been part of many startups alongside other corporate companies as well, but truth be told, I think startup is home for me. So Hala and I are here today to share our experiences and some learnings that we have had during this journey of our startup business.
So the fact that you guys are here today could mean a couple of things, or even those that are watching us online. Maybe that you're already part of a startup, maybe you're thinking of joining a startup, or that you're about to form your own startup.
Terrible idea.
Terrible idea. So, if that statement scared you or seemed a little bit harsh, then you're going to need to be more resilient, all right? Because while startups are the in thing, they are definitely not the easy thing. There's going to be a lot of naysayers, some of them the people closest to you, right? And there's an especially loud critic that lives over here and will say things like,
It'll never work. Something like this already exists. I can't do it.
but that's okay. Because there are certain truths when it comes to startups, right? You're gonna have to work hard, resilient. You're gonna be very clear on where you wanna go. You're gonna need to be especially self-motivated. And you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
You know, it's one thing to self-manage, but a completely different game when it comes to scale it to a team. And this is exactly where the culture kicks in. Because if built right, if formed right, and if communicated right, this culture will inevitably lead you to success.
So what are the key questions that you can ask yourself when you're thinking or planning on building your culture? Definitely, what do you stand for? How do you want to work? And more importantly, how you don't want to work. Because culture can sound like this.
We'll work hard, we won't care about time, we'll agree to disagree, we'll take the risks, we will put in the hours we need because we care about results, and we won't stop till we win. Or it can sound like this. This is my vision. I am the leader. I've set out the rules. These are my decision. Go and follow it.
Funny enough, both of those versions resonate with me. And interestingly, they both existed in the same startup, or one of them. So story time. I was once part of this amazing team. We had this unspoken passion, this commitment towards what we were building. We worked hard, 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, months on end, and we weren't going to quit till we win. We also partied hard, you know, because you need an outlet. And we won, and then something happened. The culture changed. It turned into a dictatorship. The voices were gone, the votes were gone, nobody's opinion mattered anymore, success wasn't shared, And these guys are smiling. I don't know if that happened to you, right? Yeah, yeah. Because you're successful now. So it's not, nobody wants to share success. So this amazing, passionate team dwindled into a skeleton of a team. A bunch of submissive people, and slowly but surely it changed. The whole thing disintegrated. So how can you avoid this? How can you work towards forming a healthy, scalable culture?
Okay, so here's what we say. These are the basic characteristics that can help you form not only a good, but a sustainable and scalable startup culture. Create passion for work. We're all here because of our passion. If you're able to create the passion for people to come to work, that's a great start. Information, make sure that the information and the knowledge flows fast. Remember, communication, communication, and communication. There's nothing like over-communication. Be agile. Startups is all about being agile. The agility has to be there because it literally changes every second, every minute, every day. We have to have people who are agile enough to respond to those changes and adapt. Respect. Respect each other's individuality and share the ideas. We suggest go for a flat structure because you need faster decision making. And if you do have a flat structure, it'll help with the faster decision making.
And the sooner you identify your culture, it will serve a very important purpose. It will be your gatekeeper. So it will only invite those people that share your values and what you stand for, and keep out those who don't. You have the freedom to create what it is, the culture that works for you. You're not bound by any preset notions. Don't cut and paste. Create the culture that works for you. Out with monotony, okay? Be brave. Make mistakes. Learn. Create innovation. Isn't that why you started on this journey?
So some companies actually start with a clean slate and form their culture as they go along. Whereas some people like it and they know what they want from the very beginning. We're taking here an example of AHOY. And AHOY's founders, they really knew what they wanted from the very beginning. On the day zero, all they cared about was output and collaboration. And those two things gave birth to these cultural values that the members of AHOY live by. You've got a voice. Feel free to speak. Share your ideas. We are all in it together. We got you. You're empowered and you're enabled. Take the risk. Fail and learn. We're in the business of innovation and technology, and unless we try, we'll not succeed. And nobody gets it right in the first instance. Embrace diversity. Now, we're in this beautiful place with so many nationalities under one roof. Yes, please get that diversity through your doors, but do not judge people based on race, color, religion, and even where they graduated from, how many years of experience do you have, and what did you do in your past life. Does not matter. You are the GOAT. What we stand by is value attitude more than the skills. Because remember, skills can be taught, but attitude can neither be changed nor be taught. Last but not the least, dream for a living. Don't limit yourself when it comes to dreaming. Dream on. Dream is what's going to get the passion through the doors. So, and also remember, impossible just does not exist.
So as not to leave you hanging, here are some key takeaways for you. Your startup culture is unique. You're going to create it from zero. Don't cut and paste. Let it be fluid. Understand that certain things will change, and that's okay. Don't fight it. As long as a team, you agree on it. It's going to be driven by a few, but it's going to be challenged and shaped by many. The 3 tools of culture creation: be clear on your purpose, make sure you have the right people, and also be clear on your process. Culture, hard to build, easy to break. Our compulsory inspirational quote for your viewing: the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. Be careful on what you'll tolerate. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shani
And this is where
Hala.
we break down and start dancing.
Let's go. The stage is yours.
All right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have an expert in private equity and venture capital. Let's welcome to the stage Samy Elsheikh.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Samy Sheikh. I'm a lawyer at Hammad Al-Mehdar. We are a Saudi firm, but I'm based in Dubai. First of all, thank you for having me. Thanks for AHOY team. Thanks, Doha. Really a pleasure to be here. So we have 10 minutes to have an overview on the legal system, on the challenges that the startups they face when they are raising capital, and how they structure their companies. So first point, when a company is in growth or you're starting your own company, we tend to see different type of focus in the companies. There is the growth, there is expansion, and then you go and raise capital. The problem with growth, expansion, and raising capital is it comes with liability. And liabilities here I'm talking about, for example, first of all, when you are growing, this means you are having more employees, you are having more liabilities, you are having more products. And then when you are expanding, you are entering into different jurisdictions, or you are entering into certain activity that they are regulated or they need certain type of permits. Most of the times, or how we see as lawyers, that these companies, they survive until it's time, for example, you are raising capital and it's time to do a due diligence on your company. So when the due diligence comes, the investor, they come, they hire an expert to go in details in your company, in your books, and in your legal documents. Most of the time there are some red flags, and these red flags can be fixed in order to receive the investment. So by looking at these red flags, you start to think, okay, why didn't I fix that? Why I didn't do any filings? Why I'm having, for example, fines because I missed a lot of deadlines, or why I'm not having a permit and no one advised me to have a permit. And here comes the role of a lawyer or the right advisor you're having with you all the way. So, for example, seeing the startups here in our ecosystem or in our regions, most of the companies, they are limited liability companies. So very simple companies, you go, you set it up, you start your business, and all is good. And it's very simple here, especially in Dubai or anywhere in the region, to set up an LLC. But the question is whether these companies, they are investor friendly or not. Can I have an investor coming into my cap table in this form of a company? Most of the time, the answer is no. Why? Because, for example, limited liability company doesn't have different classes of shares. So if I'm an investor putting money in your company, I want more privilege. I want more premium because I put money and I'm betting on your company and I'm taking more risk. So what happens here is that you wait until you restructure your company in order to receive the money. By restructuring here, most of the companies, what they do is they go incorporate, for example, a holding company. This holding company, for example, in Cayman Island or in ADGM, and this company owns the asset of your operational on your LLC, and then you admit all the investor in this company. You have the board, you have all the decision, but this is not operational company. It's just a company owning the assets. So, for example, this is one of the main point that we see when the company is raising. The other point is, how do I raise? Do I need to raise, do I need an equity round, or do I need a safe note, or do I need a loan, for example, in the company? This is the question that most of the time when you have a lawyer or you have an advisor with you will be able or will be in a good position to give you an advice on this point. So having like comparison between raising through a safe note or raising through an equity, for example, if I'm raising $1 million, do I really need to have an equity round? An equity round here means that I have to restructure my company, I have to issue shares. After issuing shares, I have to go through closing process, which means having corporate service provider, updating my company's document, updating the board of directors, and all this process, which take around 2 months to closes. And before all of that, I need to know my valuation, which most of the time in early stage company, you actually don't know your valuation. So what happens here is that you spend around 2 months raising $1 million, paying a lot of investors, a lot of money, legal fees or whatever related fees in order to close a $1 million, for example, round. However, on the other side, if you are well structured, some companies, all they do, they raise through a safe note. And in a safe note, it's a simple document that you can even find it online. It's 8 pages saying, for example, that I don't know my valuation now. However, I'm going to give you a discount on the valuation when the valuation is determined, or I'm going to give you a cap, valuation cap, which means if, for example, my valuation, if the cap is 10 million and my valuation is 20, you are going to be treated on the 10 million. And it's practically like an hour spent of time document to be drafted and to be signed. And once the document is signed, you will get funded. So when you look at the difference between both, you can raise $1 million just simply on a safe note, 1 hour of worth of work, or you can spend 2 months to close a round of investment and equity round. So what I wanted to discuss about here is that the value of having legal advisor with you or to have legal assistance. This is something important which we lack here in our region. Also we lack because lawyers, we tend to be expensive when we are giving advices. However, I'm seeing like the last 2 years, there are a lot of programs which they give access to companies to have legal service. To have legal service even for free until the company starts to really be productive. I work with the team on AHOY. We as a law firm, for example, we issued like a platform where you can go simply generate your document for free. Because when you look at it, lawyers, they don't want to spend time just to draft a safe note or spend time just to draft 5 pages document. Instead, they want to focus on an equity round where they will be charging, more money and they will get more exposure to this transaction. So in this 10 minutes, I just wanted to walk you through most of the legal challenges here we have in the region. But my advice here, whenever there is an opportunity, whenever there is a chance to have an access or to speak to your advisor before starting raising the money, you have to be prepared. You have to do this discussion and then you start speaking with the investor, because investors sometimes also can be hard on you. They can negotiate better deal if you don't have the right advisor next to you. And that's it for me. Thanks.
And now let's talk a little bit more about investments with Derek and Darshan.
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies. We'll start off with a very quick introduction. Actually, I'll go first. So I'm a part of AHOY team. I've been in AHOY for the last couple of years now, and I look after strategy, fundraising, and performance. My previous background is in management consulting. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't want to say right now, but yeah, I've been a management consultant for around 10 years. Worked in a lot of areas, strategy, business process improvement, M&A, business valuations. So I'll try to leverage some of those experiences and also from my journey with AHOY to tell you what needs to be done.
Hi, I'm Derek. I'm the founder and CEO of N2 Technology. We are a capital introduction platform using technology to base introductions on relevance for startups and investors. My background is financial markets. I was a trader, hedge fund manager, angel/VC investor. My journey to build N2 is really a culmination of lots of frustration in a very disjointed and annoying marketplace for startups.
Okay. So before we actually go into, what's the process, we want to actually clarify the air on a few things that are sort of preconceived notions. So the first thing that a lot of startups ask is that, what round am I in right now? They're so hung up on saying that I want to define the round itself. So the idea is that the funding round doesn't matter. You can call it whatever you want to. It's just something that was invented 20 years ago, and we're just still following the same thing without knowing why. So the idea is that, yes, there are certain stages, but you don't need to get hung up on this. You can call it a bridge round, you can call it seed, whatever it is. As long as it gets you money, it's just a round, simple. Second thing is valuation, and I think Samy touched upon it as well. It's an art. So I also get sometimes, when we speak to founders, they're like, my valuation is a combination of how much money am I raising and how much percentage equity I'm okay to let go. And that's just not scientific, to be very honest. So again, we'll speak a bit about it, but this is not something that a founder should be thinking about. And lastly, product market fit. There's no need for a startup to have a 100% market fit product for doing a fundraising, because that's the whole point. Because a product market fit is a journey and not a destination in itself. So you don't need to be worried about having a product that works 100% when you're doing a fundraising.
So some of the ways that we look at this at N2, which is the naming methodology, am I angel, am I this, very much dictated by the VC side of the market, so they can kind of cubbyhole you. The way we look at this is, what's your product development cycle? Where are you in the journey? Do you have paying customers? Did you just build a most loved prototype? Whatever we want to call it. And this is essentially when we dig down and we start vetting investors as to what they actually want to look at, what their thesis is. This is the part we want to understand. And there's 100 reasons, but I'll only say a few. But the main one being that the rebuttals that normally come across, you're too early, you're too late, we want to take those off the table and just make this, relevant and accurate conversations. The second part as well, valuations for me, they are so theoretical. And it's always that sort of cross-comparison, what's out there, what they're doing, different regions, yada, yada. We spoke about this at length last night. Yep. I think the biggest takeaway on what we do is when you start building your valuation, when you start building your financial projections, there are a couple of bits of information you know. One is a VC needs to make 100 to 140x on that investment, and you know roughly what you want to raise. Now, if you put the two of those in first and start working backwards, you can start building an accurate picture of what those funding rounds will look like, what KPIs you need to hit over it, and you can adjust them that way. So one of the things we're keen on doing at N2 and with AHOY and 2469 is to bring that reality into financial modeling and stop using the finger in the air methodology and relying on everybody else's valuation, which is, I raised 20 million on the back of an envelope on 100 million valuation. I mean, it's just complete nonsense. So you have to put the work in, you have to understand, and it will define how you grow your company at the same time. And in fact, it will show you whether you are venture backable or not. And yeah, product market fit, I don't have a lot to say because it is what it is.
So let's talk about how the journey looks like for a startup. First of all, as we said before, there is no standard path. Everybody makes their own path. Every startup is unique. Every co-founder is unique. Every journey is different. So there's no need to follow a standard path, the so-called standard path actually. And there are no nomenclatures. I mean, these are just fancy terms. End of the day, you're a startup, you want to raise funds, and you want to grow. That's the basic. Secondly, yes, you will receive a lot of feedback, and feedback is important, but not all feedback is good feedback. Sometimes people want to fit you in a box just to achieve short-term targets, but no, you need to actually understand, listen to everything, but accept what makes sense to you. It's as simple as that.
This is feedback from who? Feedback from investors?
Yes.
From VCs specifically?
Yes, specifically VCs. I mean, VCs don't want to invest money, they want to give feedback. They're very easy and they're very fast to give feedback about how you should be running your own business. I'll not say much about that.
Let's dig into that a little bit.
So,
one of the interesting things about VC feedback is this. is VCs are in the job of saying no, primarily, and that's their job. Can you invest? No. And the second point is this. Intrinsically, they're always wrong. They're very rarely right. That's the nature of power law. So I don't know if you should put so much weight on that feedback that you get from them. I think that customer feedback and understanding what customers are saying and prioritizing that and building the right thing and keeping them happy, which is where you're actually going to earn your money, that's the thing to really base it all on. The best thing a VC can tell you is no. Don't give me any advice, don't tell me anything. Just say no and leave the party. And that's really what I encourage any startup to get out of a conversation with a VC and not go in there. If you develop a relationship with them, they will want to help you, they will tell you all sorts of things. You've got to start valuing that on your own basis, but just go for the no. And that's 99% of the time, that's what they're going to say to you.
Yep, you hit the nail. So then rejection is obviously the norm. I mean, it happens. Like probably 95% or 99% of investors you speak to will say no. So it's the norm, it's not an exception. So there's nothing wrong with you, it's just how it is. You just have to keep trying. And we have heard this over and over in this afternoon. You just have to keep trying. And as long as you find one person to believe in you, that's the good starting point to have. So yeah, rejection is a part and parcel of what we do as startups. Then comes the actual process of investment. Now, investment is similar to a sales cycle. You have your lead generation, you have follow-ups, you have your updates. It cannot be an activity that is just done as a standalone process. It needs to be treated as something as important as a sales activity with a proper structured documentation, your CRM around it, your updates around it. So everything needs to be structured so that your investors and your prospect investors are sort of top of your mind when you want to start taking investment again.
That's 100% right, and it's always really surprising that it's always treated as this sort of side job, this ad hoc thing. We need to raise money, quick, get out there. What you should be doing is just going, we are actually selling a product here. We've built something, we've got customers, let's replicate that. This is as serious as it is both sides, and it is actually no different. So whatever you've produced in that sales funnel that you work on and you've started to understand, and every startup founder has to be a salesman at the same time, has to be a marketing guru at the same time, you have to do all of those jobs. It's 100% clear. And you have to structure this fundraising thing in the exact same way and take it as seriously as you would. If that's your target is to go and raise funding, you have to set up your process as a sales funnel and go through all the hard work that goes with it and concentrate on it properly, not some willy-nilly side hobby that 2 weeks later you go back to because you were really busy doing your day job. Who should I call? Who's an investor that would like me? No, you've got to be fully on it. And it's very difficult for startup founders to take that on board because obviously you have to segregate your time and you have to walk away from the business for a certain period of time. But if you do it properly and you make those relationships and you keep those relationships informed as you would any customer, you keep that cycle of communication going. When it comes onto your next round, those relationships are already there. When it comes to doing diligence for an investor, that story is already in existence. It lives somewhere, and they can start understanding who you are as a company, as people, much easier. So really view this as a sales cycle as well.
So same as feedback, not all investors or not all investment is good investment. As a founder, we need to be picky on who we are taking money from, why, what's the strategic value add they will bring. I mean, it's a very standard term to say we need a strategic investor, but what strategic advantage you will get from them? What are they asking for? What are the expectations? So not all good investment, not all investment is good investment. We really need to understand what will be the long-term implications of accepting money or taking them as an investor on our cap table. And lastly, again, just re-emphasizing, investment is not an ad hoc activity. It's just merely the outcome of how good your vision is, how clear your vision is, how agile you are as a team, how good your product is, what's your traction. So it's an outcome. It reflects on the organization. So anything that happens in the organization has a direct impact on the investment. There are no standalone activities in between. There are no silos here in that case.
No, it's 100%. Your business comes first, and everything that you do within that business will make this a better outcome. of raising capital. So primarily that's what you've got to concentrate on, right? Building relationships with customers, building the right product, listening to them, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's nothing people don't know, but it's something that's always worthwhile reminding.
So how to raise money? I mean, just again to re-emphasize that there's no one or two sources of investment. There are multiple sources, and depending on where you are in your stage of the company, you have a lot of options available. You initially start off with friends and families. You have angels available. You have angel investment networks now getting together to invest and accelerate. So the idea is that VCs and PE, private equity, are just one part of the entire ecosystem. You have family offices in the region and globally investing. You have government grants as well now for a lot of areas. So the idea is to say that you have avenues open. You have corporates now actually investing into companies. So we cannot be hung up on one or two sources of investment. You have to try with every single source that's out there to make sure that this happens. And in the end, if it doesn't happen, bootstrapping is the way to go. That's it. I mean, you have to bootstrap because end of the day, we cannot give up. That's the plan.
Yeah, the bootstrapping should be at the top, right?
Exactly. That's
your primary.
Most important actually to bootstrap, because bootstrap all the way so that you can actually be very confident in the investment market.
Yeah.
So how much to raise and how do we decide when to raise, how much to raise? Again, a few pointers. Consider all your expenses. Don't consider a lot of revenue. Even though you are earning revenue, things can always take a turn. Have a very healthy margin when you're raising money for unplanned circumstances. Consider the team growth. Be confident so that you can grow your team. Always be raising. Never stop having conversations about investment. Even though you have finished your round, even though you're good for the next 12 months, you always have to be in touch with your investment network, because the next time you go in the market, you cannot be something that is picked up cold after 12 or 18 months. You always have to be having these conversations. Always be out there, showcase the growth that you have so that next time you know what you're going into and it's a very short sale or an investment cycle. So the motto for us is always be raising.
Yeah, and at the early stage it is, there's some objective points and we can connect with people on that, but it's all incredibly subjective. So it's really about those relationships and building those relationships and continually communicating with them so they can build trust with you and you can build trust with them and understand what other values maybe they bring to the table. But this always be raising just means, always be communicating, always be open, always learn. I think that's a big part of this always be raising, is always be learning as well. And I love that always be raising, it's great.
Then milestones. So every fundraising needs to have a milestone attached, that using this, I'm going to achieve X, Y, Z. I'm going to have an MVP. I'm going to have these many number of clients, this much revenue, so that when you actually go back to the investors, they know that you have walked the talk, you have achieved something with the funds raised, you have linked it to the milestones, and they're more confident in your journey now. So always have milestones attached to the funds that you're raising. So it allows you actually internally to grow and understand what you need to do, and externally demonstrate a very healthy startup culture, making it easier to raise funds. Again, can't emphasize more, you need to have a very healthy provision on how much you want to raise, because things change, you pivot, circumstances change, sales takes longer. All of these needs to be considered when you're actually planning your fundraising round. Lastly, just to balance it out, don't raise more than what you need. I mean, I know it just sounds a bit, I would say, ionic, but you cannot over-liquidate. You need to understand what are the implications of the fundraising that you're doing now with the next round, how much you need to liquidate, because an over-liquidated company is not a good target as well, a good investment. So this also needs to be kept in mind with all of the other things that were just sort of discussed right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can see how these all tie in really well together and ties into your financial projections, how you're building them. This is a milestone approach is part of keeping that communication as well. So you've gone out, you've written up, you've worked out from your financial projections what that looks like and what you need to achieve to be investable going forward. You've got to keep that communication going as well. We hit a certain milestone, we hit these KPIs, but also, and this is really important, and I think a lot of people forget it, it's, startups just want to send out celebrations the whole time. We did this, hey, that's great, fantastic. But building honest relationships is also about we failed, we struggled, and how you get some people onboarded in the investment world is actually saying, can you help us with this? You know, we've been talking for the last 6 months, we've been talking for the last year, you know about us, we know you. We're really struggling with this. Now, what part of your network can help us with it? And it's surprising how many people step up to the plate and are willing to help if you're honest and open and telling them it's not all rosy. And the fact of the matter, what is your downside by telling them you've got a few failings and certain things are tough? What's the downside of that? When you go into diligence with them because they think it's all this heavenly, rosy world, they're going to know all that stuff anyway. So you might as well tell them up front and not hide it and pretend it's a different world that you're living in, a different paradigm that you're living in. So just be open, communicate these things.
Yeah, so the most interesting bit of it, the valuations. Now, it's not a science, it's just an art. As all early stage startups go, you don't know what you're worth. Nobody knows. It's just purely an estimate, and that's why, as Samy mentioned, do more of convertibles, save time. That will help. It's driven not just by your own performance, it's driven by what the market conditions are, what are the tolerance, where you are. A lot of factors go into valuation. So end of the day, the advice would be to keep it as simple as possible and not rely too much on Excel theoretical exercises to drive your valuations. I mean, projections are good to understand your targets, your milestones, your OKRs, but not for valuations. They just form a basis for investors to understand where you're heading and how fast you're going to grow.
Yeah, it's interesting how many people concentrate so much on this because the reality is, from a founder's standpoint, is I need X amount of money. What you don't want to do is obviously over-dilute because you want some ownership at the end of all your 7-10 years of really, really hard work. But it's more about the amount of money you need to get on your journey from A to B. Valuations are pretty much defined by the law of supply and demand and elasticity, right? If you go to a whole bunch of investors and you say, I'm raising 1 on 100, you don't stand a chance. If you go to an investor saying, I'm raising 1 on a 2, they're going to think you're completely stupid. So, you know, that market benchmark that's out there and what they're willing to tolerate is where it is. There's a much bigger job to do, and that's to convince them of your story and you're the right people to pull it off than spending a lot of time doing this. And in fact, if you don't raise at whatever valuation, or you refuse at a certain valuation, you don't have a business. Just imagine if your startup isn't making any money, your shares are worth shit. So let's not worry about it and get too hung up on it and spend too much time about this.
And lastly, the exit. Again, it's very strange.
I'm IPOing.
So yes.
What are you going to do?
Pre-seed companies are asked, what's your exit plan? I mean, there's no need for you to know what your exit plan is. You just have to focus on actually building value and getting the value out of your company. Yes, you can have options for your exit, but no clear plan. So you are in no liability to actually explain what your exit plan is going to be. It will come clear in time. It's not right now that you need to know how you're going to exit a company. You just started right now.
Yeah, for me, it's always one of those really weird trick questions. I always feel it's a trick question because you've got a whole bunch of VC advice out there saying, if the founder already after 1 year in the business has an exit plan, he's not dedicated. So don't have an exit plan, don't say anything. And then you get the other side of the VC community that goes, what are you doing after 7 years? How are you going to exit? Oh, I'm going to IPO, or I've got a strategic partner, or a corporate guy's going to buy me. The truth of the matter is, they don't know, and you don't know. It's a ludicrous question, and I think you should just answer it with a certain amount of sarcasm, and it goes, I'm going to IPO, or I'm going to find a strategic partner, or maybe Google are going to buy me. There we go. Let's move on to a real conversation, because that's nonsense.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for the talk. This is for Darshan mainly. What do you feel is the #1 factor in conveying the importance of that story and getting fundraising? If you could name one thing, perhaps.
I think the important thing would be the ability as a founder and a startup to pivot. I feel that's the most important bit because circumstances change. Nobody's investing in 100% product your product will change. But what needs to remain constant is your ability as a startup to actually recognize that in time and pivot to get the most out of what you have started. So for me personally, I feel the time and the experience or the time taken by a startup to find a product market fit is the most important. This involves a lot of agility on behalf of the startup, and that is something that needs to come across very clearly to an investor.
Thank you.
A question from me, guys. I'm sure you have stories. What was the weirdest pivot you've ever seen?
I got one personally, but it's when I was very young.
Okay.
I went from a summer job of fixing bicycles for the local kids to starting a car washing company all in the same time. It doesn't seem a lot of connection there, does there? But all these kids used to leave their bikes at the local shop where there was a local car park. And I'd go down there, I was chasing the business, so I'd go down to the local car park and start fixing their bikes. But I realized there's way more money in washing cars. So that was my pivot.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. So to the next speaker, I'm sure some of you will be asking, who are AHOY? What do we do? What is it? So to talk about this and to talk about the technology aspect of it as well, please welcome AHOY CTO, Hassan.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you're having a good day, enjoying the event so far. So my name is Hassan Rashid. I'm CTO of AHOY. And today, before I start my presentation, I would like to present to you my amazing startup idea, since I didn't get the chance to present earlier. So I'm building a marketplace that has blockchain, powered by AI machine learning. You have user experience, it's hosted in the metaverse, and somehow I have crypto. I'm raising 10 million for 1%. Thank you very much. Now, many times, guys, we have seen ideas like this. It's just basically blending a lot of techie words together, right? AI, blockchain, metaverse, hallelujah. Just add everything together without actually validating the idea. What exactly are we building? Ask yourself that question first. From a technical point of view, what are you building? Who's your customers? You need to know at least one person who will use your product, or one company. As a software engineer, throughout my experience of my life, a lot of people come to me, it was like, I have the next amazing idea, we're gonna be millionaire, it takes 1 week, and life is good. I'm pretty sure a lot of you went through that experience. And it's ended up being, we're building the Uber of whatever, the Airbnb of whatever. Again and again, we're seeing people building the same ideas, hoping something else will happen. The market is full of those ideas. You need to identify basically why you're building it, what problem are you solving. We need to have a problem to solve, because otherwise, why will people buy into your startup, right? So let's identify what is the problem you're solving, who's your customer, validate your idea with them. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't even Google if this idea has been done before or not. So spend a little bit of time, validate that idea. All right? We move on to the next part, and tech is not the product. The technology itself is not a product. Your end customer, your consumer, your client do not care how you build your system. They don't care at all. It doesn't mean anything to them. All right? You should care. You should definitely care. They don't care. So when you present an idea that's full of techie words, your audience basically get confused. Keep in mind, they don't come from a tech background. All right? So tech is not the product. Explain to them what is the value of your product, how you're doing it, maybe brush on it a little bit, but it doesn't matter that much. This is for your own, this is your personal problem. You need to figure out how to build it. You should not brag about how you build it. You should not brag about which programming language you use. Most of the people you're talking to them, they have no idea which those programming language anyway. So again, tech is not the product, it's the value you bring, it's the service you add, it's the output of that tech, is the product. So don't just get caught up and focus on us like, oh, we're using the latest Web 3.0. No one knows what is that. You knows, we know, okay? We live in that bubble kind of thing. They have no idea what is it, all right? So explain the value of your solution, not your technical stack. Good? All right. So we said tech is not the product, and we said they shouldn't worry about it. You should worry about it, and this is when you need to select the right tech stack, all right? So what do you mean by selecting the right tech stack? From the beginning, understand. For example, I like to program with Golang. It's a programming language. Pretty sure I can spend 6 months without hiring one Golang programmer anymore. So it's not a personal preference, right? That's because I know how to do it. I should just start developing using Golang, and I assume life is good, right? You need to look at the market. Are you able to hire people who actually know this programming language or not? Which cloud service you're going to use? Which architecture? A lot of people say, we're going to do microservices. Good. What is microservices? Basically, every line of code, live alone in a different environment, and life is good. This is not microservices, all right? You need to identify the tech stack. You need to understand the cost of that tech. There is a lot of cost behind it. So you need to identify what will be the cost behind your selection, and are you able to hire people to join you or not? So you need to keep that in mind, all right? We have an idea. We selected somehow the tech stack. Now it's time to bring a team. And the reason why I say assemble a team, not hire a team, because they need to work together, all right? Everyone you bring to your startup, especially let's say the first 10 engineers, I'm just talking technical here, but let's say the 10 engineers who join your startup basically are the one who are going to make it or break it for you, all right? Those are very valuable, and you need to assemble them together. You need people who have more than one skills, all right? As a startup, you need people who, okay, he knows backend, but he has an idea about Android. He knows backend, he has an idea about front end a little bit. So you need to assemble the right team. Again, you need to bring people fast because you need to grow, but also let go of them fast, all right? I'm not saying be rude or be a bad person, all right? But as soon as you identify something is not happening, you need to let go, all right? So more of a Lego game, you need to assemble the right team. We have a team. Life is good. Let's start developing. We go, engineers sit in a room, close the door, whiteboard, and we're not going to get out of here till we finish everything, finish the whole product, and deploy, right? We do that, right? It's like, we're not going to deploy everything till I'm satisfied. Who are you again? I'm the one who's developing the system. I know what the customer wants. I know the system. I know the problem. That's wrong approach, all right? Basically, you're just building based on your own assumption. You're not validating your idea. You're not validating your output. You need to add increment development. You need to add a small feature at a time and test the output of it, all right? For that, you can do A/B testing. For the non-technical people, A/B testing is when you deploy the same feature with two different look for it and see how people respond. All right, you put the button here or the button there, it might act differently. The response might be different, all right? Also, a tool you can use for incremental development, which is basically a DevOps tool, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment or development. As soon as you finish a feature, deploy it. Don't keep it stuck in your actual repository for a while. And I cannot deploy this till the other feature work. Doesn't matter. You finish from the APIs, deploy them. Even if the front end is not ready, deploy them. So don't hold Don't hold the feature hostage. As soon as you finish from it, deploy it and test it. And the last bit that's quite important for the incremental development is basically documentation. Every presentation, school, course, online, everywhere, people will talk about documentation. Maybe 5% of people do that. No one cares about documentation. I know the code, I know it upside down. That's very, very bad. Because whenever you have someone new, they have no idea how they build this. I need to wait for that senior engineer to explain to them what's happening. Senior engineer is busy. We cannot take his valuable time. And basically, the new joiner, it's up to him to figure out how everything works. So you always need to add, or you always need to pay huge attention to the documentation. Good? Now, let's manage our timeline, how to deploy those small features. Now, from experience, people use sprint, people use weekly deployment, whatever your methodology. That's not the problem. What I would suggest is to have your design 2 weeks ahead from your front end, and your design 1 week ahead from your back end, 1 sprint, 1 week, whatever gap you're using, ahead from your front end. Now, the reason behind that, if you have the design, let's say 2 circles in advance, you have time to validate it. Is this design work? Can this design actually, let's ask the business analyst, let's ask the expert in the field, let's run a survey. Does this design actually work? Does it make sense? This design is just someone who understood an idea and translated it. So you need to validate that. Now, if you have your design and the back end and the front end all starting at the same time, you have no time to validate anything, and that only happened after the deployment when people finally saw it and will be like, but we don't want that. All right, so make sure your design is ahead, then your back end is ahead, so that's guarantee all the time the engine is running. All right, so when the front end start working, there is APIs, there is design already in place. All right? Now we deploy to production. Life is good. System in production, you will have problems. There is no perfect system. You're always going to have problem. You're going to have that call. We need to be fixed right now. It's going to be 2 a.m. in the morning. We have an issue. I need you to push fix right now. That's going to happen. All right? What we end up doing, we do a quick fix. Whatever it takes to make this system working at that moment. Now, the problem is when we do this, and we woke up the next day, we continue as our plan as nothing happened, right? We had a problem, we did a quick fix. Let's continue the plan that we agreed on before. Let's continue the plan we did from the last sprint. Over time, all those quick fixes introduce to you technical debt. So when the time comes for you to scale, you will not be able to scale. Your whole system is just patched. So ideally, whenever you do a quick fix, address it in the next sprint. Why did we do that quick fix? How can we actually go back, visit that quick fix, and fix it immediately? I actually preach this, but I don't practice it all the time. A lot of the time, I end up finding a lot of quick fixes that I've done, and I'll be like, oh, if I only invested the time, but I always like, okay, we'll fix it later. It's not a problem. It's working. It's not a problem. We need to make the deadline. It's not a problem. Don't let your debt grow. Whenever you do a quick fix, immediately revisit that topic again. All right? Now, let's see how developers can work together. There is different process for code review. All right? One of them, peer review. Basically, I develop the code, I push it before it gets integrated with any, like the master repository or the rest of the system. Someone else needs to review the code. And this is the best place, actually, to add documentation. You can actually make documentation part of the review process. If everything is fine and there is no documentation, you should not approve that merge at all. Documentation should be dealt with the same way as your, unit testing, as any other, let's say, parameter that you use in your pull request. Another method you can use is pair programming. And pair programming might seem like wasting time or wasting resources. Basically, one is programming, was in front of the screen, writing the code, another engineer next to him, looking at the code and actually have a conversation with him. And there is a lot of value come from that. All right, 2 brain thinks better than 1. They actually work as check and balance against each other. They can bounce idea against each other. They can come up with better code because every programmer want to impress the programmer next to him. It's like, look at what I'm writing. So they usually perform better. Doesn't mean all the time you need to do that, but especially if you had a junior joining the company, pair programming is one of the best, let's say, techniques that you can introduce him to your code structure, to your code methodology, and just basically get him familiar with the system overall. Communication. Now, everyone address communication. You need to enhance communication. I'm going to talk about communication when it comes to the engineering company. They need to be involved in all aspects of the company, from marketing, selling, customer support, talking to investor, whatever communications or whatever channel of communication available, they need to get involved to understand what is the feedback. Feedback can get lost in translation. Basically, customer support will tell the BD team will tell the project manager will come tell the programmer. Throughout that journey, the message has changed. All right? So allow your engineers, allow your team basically to get involved with all your stakeholders, customers, investors, client, whatever it is. You need to embrace the culture of communication, not only among yourself, but outside as well. Now, the last bit, you need to manage your stress. It's going to be a stressful journey. Running a startup, running a technical team, it's a very stressful journey. So you need to figure a way to manage the stress. It's a very, very stressful environment. People just sitting down in front of the screen the whole time, writing code, just imagining stuff and writing it. Things get stressful, and you need to manage your team, and you need to manage the stress across your team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hassan. Moving on to our next speaker who will talk to us about marketing and sales. Please put your hands together to Chiara.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So today I will talk to you about marketing and sales. Before we start, let's make it clear. I have never studied neither marketing nor sales. I got out of university with a degree in economics and statistics, and I really wanted to work in international organizations, so I wanted to be a diplomat. But I actually found myself out of the blue becoming a founder, a solo founder, to be precise. And at that point, I had to teach myself, and I had to understand how I was going to get those partnerships, how I was going to acquire those initial users, and how I was going to grow revenue. And so since 2008, I'm old, I have been working in the fast-growing startups in acquiring users and growing revenue. I have worked across different companies. I have worked in the fashion industry and the publishing industry. I work on platform. I work in consumer apps. A couple of successes. I was working at Lamudi, which you guys probably know was bought by Bayut a couple of years ago. I created there a money-making machine. I started alone with a budget of 1,000 euros. In 6 months, I had a team, 30 people across 3 continents, and in 3 years, we were generating 80% of the revenues of the company. I also worked at Adagio, where I launched in 1 month Adagio Live and the Global Concert Hall, where we basically increased the user acquisition, but we also increased the share of active users and retention from day one. So it was a lot of fun. And when I was asked to speak here, I was a little bit concerned. There were so many different startups, and I really didn't know what was I going to talk about. One thing it's being a B2B, one thing it's being an e-commerce, one thing it's being a SaaS product. So, and also, was I going to talk to you guys about marketing or sales, or the difference between marketing and sales, and the fact that nowadays they're coming together, basically overlapping. But lucky you, I decided to drop those academic topics, and not because I didn't study them, but I thought to give you something that could apply across all the type of startups, and also some very basic tips that any founder at your stage should be aware of. And that's why I decided to talk about obsession. As a founder, you should be obsessed with growing customer, clients, and revenue. And to do that, there are a few basic things that you should start from. The first one is being obsessed with what you're selling. You probably, as Hassan before me said, you probably validated already your products, or you probably, we're all hoping that you spoke to some potential customers before going live, right? And, but you need to take it a step farther. And probably many of you have found yourself in the situation where you've been talking to potential customers before during the validation process, and then you went and launched, and it was so hard to actually sell despite all those chats before where everyone was so excited about it. Well, there are a few tricks there, and I think the very first one is to find a story that actually works. And the first thing is to identify the customers and be extremely precise about that. You probably have a product that fits different customer segments. Imagine that you are an HR company, you are an ATS, a company that is providing a service, a software to HR teams. That software might be used by HR managers, but it could also be used by headhunters. But at that point, you have a completely different story. The pain points, the needs of the HR managers will be completely different from from the headhunters. At that point, you need different stories. You need to craft for each one of them different stories, and you need more than one. And you will be practicing those. You will be speaking to these people, and you will be testing and refining and iterating until you find the stories that actually work. In the end, you just have to listen to your customers, because they're going to tell you what made them buy the product, what made them join your platform, your service. Don't forget to pinpoint the value that your product or service brings. What I mean here is, going back to the example, you can go to the HR manager and say, I am the best HR software that is out there. I mean, that might be true. But you can also go back and say, hey, I have the best HR software out there. For every open position that you have, we reduce the time to hire by 20%. Given the average open positions that you have, by the end of the year, you're saving X $1,000. Same, but different, right? Oh, sorry, I don't know how to go back, but the next thing is to be, thank you, it's to be obsessed with testing. You should be testing everything. And I think this is extremely important, because you should create a growth mindset in the company from the very beginning. And this should be managed by the founder himself or herself. You should be out there testing anything to acquire those users or customers and to grow the revenue. And you have to do it as a founder, because that will show you what actually works and what doesn't. It will give you a lot of insights on the work that you're doing. When I talk about testing, there's, anything that actually works for you. I have a few examples. I'm just going to skip them. I mean, you can go from what Tinder did. I mean, the founder, Wolf, went into the sororities. She got in all the girls, and then it was super easy knocking on the doors of the fraternities and get them in. Superhuman has done something completely different that has worked for them. They have onboarded every single user up to the first 5,000. And here I have a simple example of GoCat that actually wrote handwritten letters. Well, it was a robot doing it, and sent it to some very special customers. And some of those were so happy they picked up the phone and got back to the founder saying how happy they were that someone was sending them a customized letter. So you should test, and your tests should be very strategic. You should test what you think will bring you the best result in the shortest time and with the least effort. There are a few methodologies there to do that, and I'll skip it so we go a little bit faster. When it comes to the next obsession you should have is tracking. You should set into place some basic but accurate tracking from the very beginning. At the beginning, this information is not of a lot of help. You need data to actually work on that information. But sooner than you think, you will be sitting on a pile of gold. And that information is extremely important for you. You need, as a founder, at the beginning, you grow because of your intuition, but that intuition at a certain point is not going to be enough, and the data is very important. You need to align your teams, and you need to align your company, and data is the way you do it. They all will work towards a shared goal, shared KPIs. And also, you should always make projection as a startup, and having that data will show you if you actually reach the goals or not. There's a lot of tools out there, and happy to discuss that later on. When it comes to the fourth obsession is analyzing that data, as I just said. The data will give you a lot of information, and it will come with time. Just to give you an example, when we were at Le Moody, we were running hundreds of thousands of euros of campaigns on Facebook and Instagram, and we had a lot of data there, and we were testing everything, images, we were testing captions, we were testing titles, uppercase, lowercase, emojis, non-emojis. And after a few months, we were capable of understanding that certain pictures would work in certain countries. Living rooms with red couches would work in Morocco, but in Indonesia, we were looking at the facades of the homes for converting ads. Before I say bye, I kind of said a tiny lie before. I said that I have never studied marketing and sales, which is actually true. But the moment I started working for my companies, I had to learn a lot and I studied a lot. And I would suggest that to you. It's a continuous learning process. And back in the days, I would organize bar camps, I would be in meetups, I would organize round tables with peers that were sharing the same struggles, etc. Go out there, speak to the people that are doing your same job, share your experience, get their input, and vice versa. You will learn a lot, it will speed you up a lot. Don't be afraid of doing that. So, thank you for your time.
So my next guest, she's the managing director at Milestone Ventures. Please welcome Mashal Waqar.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Mashal. I like to call myself a startup person. So I built a global media company called The Tempest. We grew it to tens of millions of readers. Following that, I have worked with venture builders, built startups, worked with VCs, as it was interesting to hear everybody's perspective. And now I'm very deep into like the Web3 space, building a Web3 venture studio, and I have a consultancy, Milestone Ventures, where we help build audiences and communities. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Amazing. So you specialize in the area of marketing where you build traction and you build visuality to your brand, right? So can you tell us, let's say, the main 3 things that a startup founder should look into when they're trying to build that branding image that will attract this traction, or even throughout their campaigns? If they're running a campaign, how would they be able to monetize or maximum monetization out of it?
One approach I like a lot, especially, is focusing on community. I think those early users, your first 100 users, are so important, and being able to really understand, one, who they are, what they need, and really how to solve their problems and pain points. And I think that's key here. And if you can really build that up, it can be game-changing for what you're doing earlier on. Because a lot of times, I think we had some of the previous folks talk about validation. You're right, like no one validates their idea, and it's key to validate, number one, and number two, to focus on really listening. That's key, right? And the interesting thing, and then the one thing I come across, right, whenever we have founders and we're discussing their initial plan, is they have this amazing product they've built, and they're so deep into it that they start speaking in this language, which is like internal company jargon, right? And they just expect that people outside of this bubble also understand it and understand the value of it. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that happens, right? So I think you need to get out of your head, go directly to people and validate and really listen to them, understand what's happening. That's key. And then in terms of traction, be super creative, especially if you're in this region, but also if you're, if you're growing your startup globally, like really get to communities and different use cases as well for what you're trying to build. A lot of times what we've seen with a lot of founders who've grown traction, and one of the things that we realized was we were so focused on like one channel and one way that we were acquiring users organically, but then we were getting a lot of interest from other sources. And so one example of that was initially we had 2 media verticals at The Tempest, and those are editorial. We grew to 9 in like a couple of years. And so we were super focused on the editorial side, but Pinterest, which was a platform we had not been looking at, was getting us at least 2 million people every month. And that had grown up like week over week, right? And this was one of those platforms that I think we had our fellows initially just like a few folks working on it. And so it wasn't really high priority. But once we started looking at where we were getting interest from and what people were really checking out and what was getting us traction, it was one that we realized was like a complete sort of gold mine in a way, right? So I think in terms of that, it may not be your most expected source, but definitely go to different sources and experiment and learn from that and see what works and what doesn't. And finally, I would say try building playbooks early on. And what I mean by that is whenever you try something and you start seeing some form of results, try doing it again and try different ways of doing it. And if you see similar results, you've almost got like you've got a playbook, and that's an interesting way to start, where test, repeat, experiment until you really understand what you're doing. And this really helps. I think this is what differentiates incredible founders from okay founders, right? And when I say incredible founders, they really know what's happening, they know what's being tested, they can tell you all those little tiny details, and those really matter from a success perspective, and just in terms of long-term growth. That's one thing I've really seen a difference in.
Very informative answer. We really appreciate it. So, what do you think, or based on your experience, where do you see the biggest mistakes that an entrepreneur could do when it comes to marketing? One thing that you have mentioned is when you find something that's working, you have to do it again and also do it creatively and differently. Well, is it advised to do it all the time, especially when it works sometimes and sometimes doesn't?
So if something doesn't work, you have to get to the why. You need to come up with a why, and you need to understand why it didn't work. Because sometimes there are things that are in your control, there are other times there aren't, right? So one example is algorithms and social media. The same content may be incredible content, but may not do well. And we're at a time, especially in terms of socials, where a lot is changing, and from a week-to-week basis, right? So unfortunately, especially if you're heading content and you're understanding and you're trying to build traction through it, you have to understand that you're going to have to keep testing things out, because what works today and next week will completely probably be irrelevant a few months from now. And I think anyone who has sort of been testing, and especially with paid advertising, which is something I don't recommend early on, you're going to be wasting a lot of ad budget just to get to these results. So the quick answer is keep testing out and obviously, experimenting. But one thing I see, and then this is a common mistake I think that people make, is they put a lot of initial funding into PR and press. And press is not traction. I think that money could be way better utilized and spent on things like user traction and building communities, and just really, really, I think, focusing on the product as well. But a lot of times, especially I think when you're growing a startup, it can be cool to see certain founders, being covered by media companies and being very public facing, and that's all cool. But your responsibility as a founder is focused on your business and your actual startup, and in growing that traction and in building it out. And so I think that's one thing where, especially if you've got limited funding, don't put it into PR. Don't do that. This is one which might be a bit unpopular, but I'm not a fan of agencies. We spoke about culture here
Anyone
earlier.
from an agency here, by the way? No one is here.
Everyone's just going to be sending me hate tweets later. But no, I think the difference, and I'll tell you why, right? Agencies can be great for some companies, but if you've got a startup, internal resources and building your initial team out is unparalleled. You can't compare an agency model to having your in-house team. And earlier we had folks speak about culture and all those things, and they're important. You need to be building out your day one team. Your core team is what gets you from this level to the next. And so that's what you really want to focus on, and that's who you want to focus on working with. And again, when you have that in-house team, you can again build that culture where you're super fast, you're super quick, you're testing things out, you're shipping as quickly as possible, which is really what you need to be doing, right? I think one of the guys here, the CTO, I'm so sorry I'm blanking on your name, but you spoke about ship no matter what, right? All the features that you can, and I think that's important. So even with your marketing and your content, post. Literally post and try. I think use that same mentality in all areas of your startup and in all areas of growth. Try things, just put them out. Done is better than perfect. You can't be trying to get something perfect and you miss out on a lot of the things that you could have, again, gotten to if you'd just done it faster. So I think that's another one.
Thank you. Do you guys have any questions marketing related? So I'll keep asking her from my line of questions. All right. So one thing that you're venturing to is Web3, as you mentioned, right? So is it how did you choose, or why did you select Web3 specifically? And the second part of the question is, from a marketing perspective, so Web3 specifically, the metaverse is a new dimension. It's a reality within reality. So how can the normal everyday marketing of someone, all the activities that we see, like channel marketing or even social media marketing be translated into this different but real world?
Oh, I love this question so much. So I had nothing to do with Web3. I am a media startup hardcore venture person, right? And I started looking at it because I'm super active on Twitter. And some of my closest friends, who I consider the smartest people, in my world, were starting to seriously build on it. And I was curious, and I do have a security background, so I am a techie, and I understood the technical side, but I wasn't sure what was happening. And I see one announcement after the other where there's this whole hype, suddenly there's NFTs and everyone's making money off of it. And I'm like, I don't know if that's why I want to get into it, but I want to understand what all of this is about. And so I actually started with NFTs as well. So I asked my best friend to share a little bit about what he was working on, and that's how I got into this space. From there, I realized there was a lot more. So all the headlines we were reading were very different from the actual builders. And so one after the other, I started joining a couple of DAOs, and that's a decentralized organization. And for those who don't understand, a DAO is basically a company, but people in this company can vote on it. It's almost like a community with like a bank account that's joined, and there's a lot of transparency, and you can see where money is being funneled, you can see what's happening, and you can vote on it, and you have a say in it. So it's a very different structure of working, and it completely blew my mind because I had never seen anything work like this. And I was blown away, so I thought, you know what, I want to go all in and see what this is about. And so that's how I joined the space. And then from there, started working and contributing, and it's fascinating. I think it's the most intellectually stimulated I've felt in a long time. And the interesting thing is, to anyone who's not from the space, you'll see headlines like FTX and SBF and one or the other bigger companies who've raised so much money doing terrible things and terrible headlines, right? Which will make you think like crypto is bust. But the real work is being done from a technical perspective, and the real builders are still here, and they're building, and they're so it's amazing what they're doing, right? And one of the bigger aims, so I was a DEF CON scholar this year, and Ethereum Foundation is, one of the bigger champions of introducing blockchain into the world. Before I became part of this ecosystem, I thought blockchain was a buzzword. But then I sat and met with people who are implementing this, farmers in certain countries in Africa, and I'm blanking on the countries' names right now, but the use cases that I learned about from an agriculture perspective, from an education perspective, an accessibility perspective blew my mind, because everything up until that point that I had heard about the space was so buzzwordy and it just didn't make sense. But when I looked at the actual use cases and millions of people actually using a lot of this stuff, it was incredible. And I realized there's a difference between what you see in the media and then what's actually being done. And people in this space understand that and recognize it. And in terms of marketing, I think a lot of companies in this space have a long way to go, because they need to get everyone to be able to understand it and to get the real work highlighted. Right? I think from a media perspective, there's a lot of work this space needs to do, and in communicating better. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mashal, for your time. We really appreciate it. Let's give it up one more time for Mashal.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we reached the end of our event. But to close the event, I will welcome again to the stage AHOY CEO and co-founder Jamil Shenawi.
I have good news for you. I'm not going to speak. Just everybody, please come. Let's take a picture. And for everybody on stream watching us online, thank you for watching. Please do visit our website, ahoy.technology and 2469.com. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And for every startup, everybody in the ecosystem out there, please reach out. Let's collaborate. We're all here together to make this happen.